What's up, Packers fans? Welcome into this Pack-A-Day Happy Hour. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. You know where to find the podcast. You know all the good stuff already. So let's jump in right away. Per usual, we'll get to all of your questions throughout the course, at least as many as I possibly can over the course of the next hour or so. Should have right up until about 4 o'clock p.m. or until we run out of questions. As always, super chats will go to the top. And as we get to the end, might have to go to members' questions only. But as mentioned, we'll try to get to as many questions as humanly possible. So let's jump into it right away. And by the way, thanks for being here. Number two, hope you're having a great start to your holiday weekend and hope you guys all have a very safe and happy Memorial Day weekend. And of course, next week, we've got Packers practice on Wednesday. I'll be there. I'll be breaking it all down for you ahead of time, going over what I'm going to be watching for. And then, of course, we'll break it down for you as well with everything that happened at that first open Packers practice of 2025. Should be exciting. Let's kick things off with Autumn. I saw that you upgraded, Autumn. Thank you so much for that. Appreciate you a ton. We'll start with Mike's question today. Happy Friday, Andy. Really enjoyed the free agency video. Saw a breakdown of Oliver where it seemed like he could play more linebacker. I'm assuming you mean kind of off-ball linebacker here. Is it possible Quay may be competing with Hopper and Oliver for a 2026 spot? Let's start with Oliver first. Here's my feel on Oliver as I watched him play in college and just kind of hearing different people talk about him. The one interesting thing here, and Justice was the one who initially found some talk of this when he was talking about when I think it was maybe Halfley talked about Oliver, but then they also talked about bringing in DeMarcus Covington. With DeMarcus Covington, one of the things that they really liked is that he has experience in different fronts. And then when he talked about Isaiah Oliver, he talked about him as an on-ball linebacker. If you also go back to the draft and listen to Matt LaFleur talk about it after, there's also some mention or some like veiled kind of thoughts of maybe using some different fronts this season, changing things up. I think we might see a little bit of dabbling in almost like some 3-4 fronts, maybe, just maybe. That's not confirmed. We don't know that for sure. But we know that Jeff Halfley loves to be unique and different, and he's going to change things up, and it's going to be broken down by which opponent they're playing and what his players do well. I think we might see some stand-up outside linebackers this year, whether that's Gary or Colin Oliver. That could be something we see. Whether it is or not, we'll have to wait and see, but it's a possibility. The second thing here is the way that I look at Colin Oliver in general, and again, just hearing how some of the coaches and scouts and GMs have talked about him, or GM in this case, have talked about him. I believe that he is a designated pass rusher who also can play probably some strong side linebacker in a 4-3. I think it just gives him some versatility. We know that Green Bay doesn't want players that can just do kind of one thing or are just going to be a specialist on something. As Brian Gutekunst has talked about on numerous times in the past, this is not something where they just want a designated pass rusher as a defensive end, and that's all he can do. Because all of a sudden, if Aaron Sorrell and LVN and Rashawn Gary go down, now you might end up having to play Colin Oliver full-time at defensive end, and he just can't hold up against the run, and that becomes a problem. So they want versatility. We know that it's something that they preach every single year. They not only preach it, but they back it up. They go after players who are super versatile. So with Oliver, the fact that he has played off-ball linebacker is encouraging because what he kind of is in a base defense, he's a strong side linebacker. Now, once you get to nickel and dime, there is no strong side linebacker on the field, but then what he becomes is a designated pass rusher off the edge. So on early downs, he's a base 4-3 linebacker as a strong side backer. On passing downs, he's a designated pass rusher, and he has special teams ability. So that's how I see him being used. To me, there's not really any carryover between what Quay Walker does and what Colin Oliver does. So to me, they are not related. They could both potentially be in the same 4-3 defense at a time where Quay's in the middle, Edgerrin Cooper's at weak side, and Colin Oliver's as a strong side. You could theoretically see that. But we're not talking about two players that are, despite having maybe linebacker in their name, they're not anywhere near the same as how they're going to be utilized. So I don't see that. As far as Tyron Hopper goes, that's a little bit more of an interesting conversation where if Hopper would come out this year and just look awesome, like take a legitimate step and look like a starting caliber linebacker, that absolutely could affect Quay. if Hopper and Cooper look like the future of the linebacker position, and now you've got a couple years after this of Hopper and Cooper making no money, and now Quay Walker's an unrestricted free agent next year because they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, yeah, that absolutely could affect Quay Walker. That's possible they just want all 3 and they would want to bring Quay back anyway. But my guess would be if they felt great about Edgerrin Cooper and Tyron Hopper as they're starting 2 super cheap for the next couple seasons, they would go in that direction and let Quay Walker walk, for lack of or I guess no pun intended, in free agency. So that could affect him. I just don't know if we're going to get to that point. And it's going to take, I think, a lot for Tyron Hopper to get there this season, but certainly not impossible. So I would say Quay definitely could be affected by what Hopper does. Potentially, it's probably a slim chance, but it's possible. I don't think Isaiah Oliver is going to affect Quay Walker in any real way. All right, Chicken, with the salary cap rising every year by so much, and after the Barkley debacle, teams won't let their superstars walk out the door, leading to the middle tier players getting paid top market. What does the future of free agency look like as less and less middle tier players hit the open market? Let's see. All right. So let's talk about that first. The first thing I would say is that's what it felt like this offseason. Okay. We don't know for certain that that's going to be the case all the time. I do expect the cap to continue to go up, but we could see teams start spending more on free agents, which we kind of saw this year. Teams spending more to keep their quarterbacks and to give, big contracts to players that they've liked. And at some point, usually teams are going to exhaust that and it's going to shrink up. And then teams are going to get to these salary cap situations where they have to release players or they can't re-sign some guys that they like. And they're going to have to let some players go or get really aggressive with borrowing. But that's usually going to catch up with you at some point eventually as well. There's probably always going to be a team or two that have screwed something up from a salary cap standpoint, or just go full New York Giants and let Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney walk in the same off season, right? I don't think we've seen the death of free agency. I do think it's going to be harder to find guys like Saquon and Xavier McKinney. I do think it's going to be harder to find big time tier 1 sort of free agents. And I think you're going to see more of guys that are, potentially traded like DK Metcalf this past year, and see a little bit more of that where you're going to have to give big contracts plus a pick to get maybe a player like that. But let's let this play out a little bit. These things tend to ebb and flow where teams get a little bit more cautious with spending money and they save a little bit. And then all of a sudden there's a huge rise in prices where they start paying players a lot more. And then they have to kind of come back and release some of those players because they spent too much and don't have money to spend. And it kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. I do think there's absolutely something to what you're saying. I do think teams are getting much better at this. And you should not let Xavier McKinney get out the door. You should not let Saquon Barkley get out the door. Those are not things that should happen. You always have levers and avenues to pull to make sure that those players can stay in your building. And when you want to do that, you better do that. But even next year for Green Bay, right? There's a good chunk of their guys. Now, those aren't probably stars unless Zack Tom hits the open market, but guys like Rasheed Walker and Romeo Doubs, Christian Watson, Sean Rhyan, Quay Walker, you could have some really good players hit the open market from Green Bay. Some will, some won't. And there are going to be other teams like that as well. And there'll be tiers of free agents like this year with Paulson Adebo and some of those type of players where you can still find good players, Aaron Banks at guard. But I do wonder if we're going to see those upper echelon players become available. And if they are, it might, again, be via trade like a Trey Hendrickson if he becomes available, or like DK Metcalf like we talked about. It'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye on, but I'm not 100% sold that this is the death of top-tier free agency. But I do think teams are smarter, and I do think we're starting to see it trend a little bit in that direction. Actually, how crazy the 2016 to 2020 NFL drafts were like 90% of all the superstars are from those classes. I haven't done a deep study on it, Chicken, but I will absolutely take your word on that. Happy long weekend Friday, Andy. Don't forget to hit like, everyone. John, appreciate that. And yes, make sure to hit that like button. My idea for fixing the Elton contract issue: convert $6 million of his 2026 salary to a March 1st roster bonus. That way, if Goody cuts him, he'll have to do it before free agency and Elton can get paid. I like overall the way that you're thinking here is to kind of turn that base salary more into roster bonus. That absolutely could be something that would be beneficial for Elton and doesn't cost Green Bay anything additional other than they have to make that decision a little bit sooner. I would not do it March 1st. I would do it like the second day of the the league year. so that it's still then. And if you want, you can still trade him prior to that. That would be something that Green Bay would have. I would give themselves 2 to 3 days leeway where they can try to trade him. And then if it doesn't work, they could release him or decide to keep him at that point. But overall, I like the way that you're thinking with that aspect of it. I do wonder if maybe that, along with basically the idea that, maybe he gets some incentives in his contract this year for games played or whatever. I do wonder if that could bridge the gap a little bit so that Elton is not hung in limbo, a la what Jair Alexander's going through right now, where Green Bay holds all the cards and can keep Jair up until the start of the regular season, trying to find a trade or trying to decide what they want to do, where Jair really has no, ability to kind of counteract that in any real way. I'm sure Elton does not want to be in that same situation. So that is a compromise that they could potentially work out. That would be one that I think would be certainly beneficial for Elton and does not really cost Green Bay a ton. Add in maybe a couple incentives in there, and maybe you're able to close that gap and get Elton excited for playing center in 2025 with Green Bay. That sounds like a good plan, but he will probably want incentives for the season. There we go. Maybe change the language about Pro Bowl bonus and give him some performance incentives. We're on the same page, Mike. PFF highlighted Tom as a player who could become the best tackle in 2025. Most of the guys on the list were first and second year players. Should we just tag him if we cannot work out a long-term deal? Zack Tom's interesting. I think you just get him on a long-term deal. I think that makes the most sense. That's going to push some of that money out a little bit later. You don't need him on a huge contract next year. You probably don't want him on a huge contract next year. You're probably going to still want some flexibility. So yes, you could franchise tag him next year, but that's going to have an exorbitant cost against the salary cap. And you're going to have to make some other moves that you're probably not going to want to make to fit that franchise tag on there. So if I'm Green Bay, I'm just doing everything in my power. I mean, I think this is relatively simple, right? If you look at, let me see if I can pull this up really quick here. Let's see. Can we get position rankings somehow? Here we go. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Give me 1 second. Okay. So if you're looking at the highest paid contracts right now for right tackles, right? Penei Sewell's making $28 million per year. Lane Johnson is making $25 million per year. Those are the two standard bearers at tackle. And even the top tackle period is Tristan Wirfs at $28 million. And then Trent Williams at left tackle after that is $27.5 million. I think you can have a pretty simple conversation with Zack Tom and his agent and say, listen, you are unbelievable. You're one of the best tackles in all of football. You're not quite Penei Sewell. But Lane Johnson, the second highest paid right tackle, who's a little bit older in age, right? He is 35 years old. Okay. He's getting 25 mil per year. We're going to beat that for you. We're going to give you 26 million per year, making you the second highest paid right tackle in football to only Penei Sewell. For 4 years, 26 million, we're going to give you $100+ million in that contract. As far as guarantees go, Penei Sewell got 42 million guaranteed. Green Bay's going to probably want to keep that closer to maybe 30 to 35, but 35 million maybe guaranteed. I mean, you're talking 4 years, over $100 million, at 26 million, right around there. And at 26 million is what Christian Darrisaw got as well. I feel like Darrisaw at left tackle at age 25 is right about what Zack Tom is at right tackle at a similar age, right? So 26 million, 4 years, 104 million with 30 million in signing bonuses or right around there. If you're Zack Tom and his agent, I don't know how you say no to that. And again, you can sort of prorate that. So it hits a little bit less next year, pays well the following 3 years. You're going to have to work on some of the structure stuff, but I don't know who says no to that. For Green Bay, you get one of the best tackles in football for the next 4 seasons. You're not paying them the highest market value. So that's a win for Green Bay. And the beautiful thing with Zack Tom is you're getting baked in value for a couple different things. He's young. He's a homegrown Packer. He's had no off-field issues, consummate professional. And the big thing is legitimate, real, true 5-position versatility. No matter what you do at the other spots, if all of a sudden you draft a unbelievable right tackle, awesome. You can move Zack Tom if you need to. Like, it gives you so much optionality moving forward with him. It is well worth it just for that alone. His 4-year extension would cover his 27, 28, 29, and 30-year seasons, the prime of his career. For Zack Tom, it's really tough to say no to $104 million as an extension. Add on top of that, good signing bonus, making you the second highest paid right tackle in all of football. Again, I don't know how you say no to that. It just feels like there's a very simple solution there. And I think it works for all sides. Plus, again, Green Bay gets some roster flexibility next year by not having him on a franchise tag. It all the way around makes sense. So to me, 4 years, $26 million per year, about 30 to 35 million in total guarantees and signing bonuses. Make it happen. Keep him in Green Bay. The one thing I'll just add on top of that really quick, I do wonder if there's a world in which Jordan Morgan and Anthony Belton look awesome. And I mean, just like really good. Like Jordan Morgan looks like he can be a great left tackle. And Anthony Belton looks like he can be, at minimum, a really, really good right tackle. Okay. If you felt that way and Aaron Banks isn't going anywhere and you decide to keep Elton Jenkins next year, you could end up theoretically with a decision of like, would you want Zack Tom for 4 years, $106 million or $104 million, whatever it ends up being? Or would you want Sean Rhyan at right guard for 3 years, $33 million? Like that's a $70 million difference. That's a pretty big difference. And in that scenario, you could bring back Sean Rhyan, go with Belton and Morgan as your tackles, go with Aaron Banks at left guard, Elton Jenkins at center, and really have still a good starting lineup along the offensive line. Redraft some players, which you're really good at, maybe bring in another depth piece as a free agent and save a ton of money that way and can go then spend that elsewhere. I don't think that's going to be the case. I would love if you had Belton and Morgan being great already, which gave you that option, but it would just be interesting if they felt really, really great about those two, if it does change the calculus at all. From our group of pending free agents, he's the only one worth the tag. That is 1,000,000% true. You need to do another 10 things I think video. I should do that. Let me add that to the list. I think I did that for members last time. Maybe I'll do that one again coming up. 10 things I think. All right. Added to the list, Gary. Kenny is getting older and is more effective with fresh legs. Should we worry that there's no one experienced to spell him? If Brinson Stackhouse don't develop, will Goody need to trade for someone? Yeah, it's my biggest concern. I think depth at corner, depth at defensive tackle. I do wonder if they're just going to be like, screw it. We're not going to get, we don't care as much about these big run stuffing guys. We want guys shooting into the backfield a little bit more. And maybe then you can go with Carl Brooks and Devontae Wyatt together at defensive tackle and just say, get up the field. Warren Brinson, same thing. Get up the field. But they do need to pay or play Kenny a little bit less. They do need to keep him a little bit more fresh. It's why I also wonder if maybe there is a way to keep Brinson and Stackhouse and maybe let them play a little bit more on earlier downs and try to weaponize those guys as run defenders a little bit more. It's not the worst idea in the world, but they're going to have to figure out how to navigate that. I think they're fine without trading for somebody if everyone stays healthy, but specifically if Kenny goes down pre-trade deadline, I think they're going to absolutely have to look at adding potentially another defensive tackle. Off-season show idea, underrated contributors of the LaFleur or maybe Gutekunst era could be coaches or players. I like that, John. That's a good one. If you had to pick a current Packer to represent the green and gold in the flag football Olympics, who would it be? Pretend the games were this summer, as 3 years out is too far for injury and decline. Let's see. A couple different directions off the top of my head. Just trying to think if there's anybody else. I'm just thinking through my head right now. I think there's two options. I think one makes the most sense. Considering he's still on the roster right now, I do think you could still make an argument for Jair Alexander. Like from a pure, he doesn't have to tackle, right? There's no shoulder. From a pure coverage standpoint, he is still as good as it gets. He can change directions, flip his hips, stick with guys. That's a real legitimate good option as a corner. The guy I'll probably go with, though, is Edgerrin Cooper. We have talked about it on so many different occasions. This guy just moves faster than anyone else on the field. And as a designated rusher, from him to get from point A to point B, where you need him to, for anyone who has ever played quarterback in flag football, like it is unnerving when that guy gets there so freaking quick. And you're just immediately, because it's not like, as a quarterback, you're not going to outrun Cooper to the sideline. I mean, maybe it's Lamar, but even Lamar, like Edgerrin Cooper is going to give him a run for his money. And you can't like really like stiff arm or anything like that. And your flags are just exposed. So when you got somebody on you like that, you just feel like you got to get rid of the ball so fast and your clock just heats up in an insanely fast way. So I think Edgerrin Cooper would be, now if you can get Micah Parsons, like Micah Parsons, just a better version of Cooper. So maybe you don't need Cooper, but I think Cooper would be a heck of an asset to any flag football team. That's who I would probably go with. But Jair is certainly in that conversation. Those would probably be the main two, to be honest. Is Sean Rhyan the template for year 2 players who have had a disappointing first season? He focused, listened, and showed the talent he has to become a decent offensive lineman. Looking at you, Hopper and Glover, you could put Jacob Monk in that conversation as well. I mean, here's the thing with Sean Rhyan. Sean was really good coming out of college. I thought he was a fantastic player. I really liked his tape coming out. Was kind of going from tackle to guard, came in overweight, which is weird. You don't see that happen too much anymore because the entire pre-draft process, it's to get to the point where you're running all the 40-yard dashes and the, agility drills and doing all those things. You don't see many people come in out of shape or overweight. Ryan didn't take it seriously, immediately got in the doghouse, then got suspended at the end of the year, which was another huge issue. Comes back the next season in year 2. You would think he learned his lesson, comes in out of shape again, but locked in, focused, got in shape throughout the course of the season. By the end of the year, was rotating with John Runyon Jr. And I think that part of it really helped him as he transitioned into year 3 as a true starter. So yeah, I mean, I don't know that he was quite there ready in year 2 to begin with, but I do think that his progression from rookie year really to third year was noteworthy. And if there is a player that struggles, that's certainly one. But we've seen this a lot. Like Devontae Adams is another great example. Now, I think injuries in year 2 derailed him quite a bit, but solid as a rookie, big step back in year 2 to the point where people wanted him cut, to break out in year 3 and then just ridiculous receiver from there. Now, we've seen this before. Sometimes it happens in year 2. Sometimes it happens in year 3. Sometimes it never happens. And it just is different for every single player. But Sean Ryan's a good one. I just don't think it was totally just 2 years. I think it was really that third year where he kind of broke out in a more significant way. Is there a scenario where Sean Rhyan is kept next year to replace Jenkins? Maybe. Jenkins is no lock to make the team right now based on his contract and a $20 million savings by letting him go. You're probably looking at about 11 to 12 million per year, I would think, to bring Sean Rhyan back, maybe even a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. We'll see how he performs this year. But you theoretically could if you felt like he was a good enough center to take that spot. Yeah, possible. I think he's a guard. Quite frankly, I don't think he's a center, but it's not impossible. And they definitely have cross-trained him at center if need be. So it's an interesting question. I don't foresee it, but not entirely impossible either. All right. Let's see. So we're going to come back to Aaron Harper at 301. We're going to get to the super chat really quick here. I think the Packers should let Ryan hit the market after the season. I'd like to see the Packers play in Dublin or Berlin next season. All right. 2 different topics there, but yeah, I think the more likely scenario is that Sean Rhyan hits the market. There's a chance he could be back, but I think it's more likely he's gone. And I listen, I think it'd be really fun to see the Packers in Ireland. I would be all for it. I just want as few, competitive disadvantages as possible when it comes to that. I mean, it's just going to be something we all have to get used to, but maybe if we wait till the 18-week season and you get that double bye, I think that would be a little bit more palatable, but I would love to see the Packers in Ireland. And I had already booked a hotel in case the Packers played in Ireland this year. Obviously that is now canceled, but I was definitely planning on going had the Packers played in Ireland. So I was looking forward to it. Unfortunately it didn't happen, but hopefully it does happen at some point in time. All right, let's get back here. Hi, Go Pack Go. Remember the Bears still suck. Aaron, appreciate you. Is there a decent in-house option to take over defensive coordinator after Hafley gets poached? Yeah, I've talked about this before. DeMarcus Covington, I think, would be in that conversation. There's probably a couple other coaches on the defensive front who would be in that conversation as well. I don't view it that way. If Jeff Hafley is gone, they will interview those people. And maybe it is DeMarcus Covington. That's certainly within the realm of possibility, but they will put together a exhaustive search to find that next defensive coordinator. It's not going to have to be somebody that's in-house. So whether that's a current defensive head coach that gets fired or a young up-and-coming defensive coach from somewhere else, or, whomever it might be, or maybe it is DeMarcus Covington. They will search wide and far to make sure that they are getting the best replacement possible for Jeff Hafley in that scenario. Would you like in some way for it to be somebody that can continue to run the same things that Jeff Hafley's been running because it's been successful? Sure. That would be a nice, sort of consolation to losing Hafley, but it can't be the be all end all. You have to get the best guy for the job. And the thing about Goody is that he continues to get very versatile pieces so that if the next coordinator wants to go with 3-4 or change things up, you still have players that can play regardless of the scheme that Hafley or any other coordinator wants to run. So I think it would be an exhaustive search and they would get the best guy for the job or try to get the best guy for the job. It wouldn't necessarily have to be somebody in-house. All right, we'll come back to Doug at 304 here. Dennis Reynolds, will be interesting to see which undrafted free agent competes with Monk for backup center. Good opportunity. Yeah, I don't know that I would say there's any undrafted free agent that's necessarily competing with Monk for backup center. And how I would view this is you're going to keep your best offensive lineman. And with that sort of in mind, really, if you look at like players who can play center, right? I don't know that any of their, sort of next guys up, maybe they said, I think Goody said specifically that I think John Williams could potentially play center just because of how smart he is, but he's probably more tackle guard. Travis Glover, Kadeem Telfort, not centers. Donovan Jennings maybe could, but let's just keep him at guard to begin with. Tyler Cooper, maybe, but I think he's more of a guard. JJ Lippy's a guard. Maybe he could play center. Brant Banks is more tackle guard. And then Trey Hill is center guard, but he's not an undrafted free agent. He's had some years in the league. If you listen to the show today, you'll know exactly who he is. I don't think that they have a, sort of player to quote unquote compete with Jacob Monk for backup center. If Monk makes it, he'll have the opportunity to be that. But if Elton Jenkins were to go down, my guess would be that it would be Sean Rhyan that would be moving over, playing center in his absence. And then whoever is the best player available, probably either Anthony Belton or Jordan Morgan, would then be playing at right guard. So I don't necessarily expect there to be a true backup center. And then after that, if Jenkins goes down and then Ryan goes down, now you're at a situation where if Monk's still on the team, it's probably just him. Or you might get to the point where you have to move Zack Tom over, which of course is, I don't think, what anyone would want to do, but they'll cross-train those guys too. Maybe there's somebody else who gets some time there, but you're probably looking at it as Sean Rhyan as the true backup right now. And then probably Jacob Monk, if he makes the team, as the number 3 guy after that. Decided not to go to Dublin. We'll see the Packers weeks 2 through 4 in Arizona and Pittsburgh. If Aaron is there, and possibly here in Chicago if the temperature isn't bad. That sounds like a perfect Packers viewing party and schedule for you, Mike. Love that for you every second of the way. Should be some really good games in that. So weeks 2 through 4 in Arizona and Pitt. Yeah, those are 2 really good games. So I think you're going to enjoy the heck out of that. All right, where do we leave off? All right, Andy, we'll be seeing a breakout year from Brenton Cox this year. I would love that. I thought that the end of last year looked really good for Brenton Cox. I think there's a world in which he might have to compete with, Kingsley Enagbare for that number 5 spot. I've talked about it with Justice. I think if I had to choose right now between Brenton Cox and Kingsley Enagbare, Cox makes $2 million less and has a year of team control as a restricted free agent next year, whereas Enagbare is a unrestricted free agent. And I do think there's a chance, not saying it's for certain, but I think there's a chance that you might be able to pick up a 7th round pick or a conditional round pick for Enagbare at cut down time. So if I can get a pick for Enagbare, plus save $2 million along the way, plus have somebody who's under team control like Brenton Cox next year, at least on a restricted free agent deal, if he does break out in any sort of significant way, that's probably the direction that I would go in. It's all going to be dependent upon how good he looks this year, and then where Baron Sorrell and Colin Oliver fit in the entire equation, not to mention if LVN breaks out, what Rashawn Gary looks like. There's going to be opportunity there, but we'll see how much opportunity he gets. But the first thing first for him is he's going to have to make the 53-man roster. And then if so, just how involved can he get on this defense and how much opportunity does he get? And can he make the most of those opportunities? Chelios Cheese Pack. Thank you so much for the live feed. This is Getting to the Facts. So great to chill out on a fine Friday afternoon and listen to the Packers news told in a professional fashion. Appreciate it. Chelios, appreciate that a ton. Thanks for being here and glad that you are enjoying the podcast and the show. I think this is Murphy's last week. Are you telling me that it's Murphy's last week? I haven't looked into it too much. I think whether it's his last week or not, I think what you're going to see is when they do the shareholders meeting is when you'll do sort of the official passing of the torch from like a public standpoint. I could be wrong on that. We'll see if that maybe goes a little bit differently. I'm sure things have already been started to be transitioned on the back end, and Murphy's kind of handing everything over. But my guess would be is at the shareholders meeting is when we see kind of the outside of Lambeau passing of the torch and giving that to Ed Policy moving forward. Thoughts on King and Haddon contributing this year? Eric, I am glad that you brought it up. I don't mean to poo-poo your question right here, but I actually spent the entire day, not an entire day, but a good chunk of the day watching both Kamal Haddon and Kalen King back from their time in college, as well as some preseason stuff from last year. And I have an episode coming out Sunday breaking down those two players and what they can bring to the team. So stick around on Sunday. Tomorrow's episode is going to be the 2024, the last year's roster at this time versus this year's roster right now, and which one is better, where they've made upgrades, where they maybe don't look as strong. We're going to kind of compare the two. It actually worked out perfect. I did not plan it this way. I did not even recognize it until today. But that episode last year, I put together on May 24th. And tomorrow, of course, is May 24th. So I had the whole roster from last year already on there. And then I had the one from 2023 too, which was fun to look back at. But it's a perfect apples to apples comparison to where things were at a year ago, really tomorrow. And then we'll take a look at how they compare. And then Kamal Haddon and Kalen King on Sunday with the key roster battles to look forward to the remainder of this offseason coming up on Monday. But the players get nervous when they are waiting on a big money deal. Yeah, Justice and I have talked about this, but that the second contract for a player is just massive. If you get a third contract, you're already, good to go, because you've probably made a lot of money already and you're probably a Pro Bowl caliber player. So you've been paid handsomely along the way. If you're a big time player getting a third contract, most players don't get to that third contract. So your first contract is your cheap one, right? Unless you're like a top 20 pick in the NFL, that first, even then, like the top, or for like 10 through 20 is still pretty cost controlled. Unless you're one of those premium picks, that first contract is not an exorbitant contract. So everyone is waiting for that second contract. That's the one that you have to make pay off and get that big money payday. It's why somebody like AJ Dillon, is like, it's such a devastating situation for him. He took a little less money to go back to Green Bay last year, to stay in Green Bay, play with the Packers, then gets the neck injury, and now has to settle for just slightly more than a vet minimum in Philly. These last 2 years should have been his big paydays, and it just hasn't come to fruition for him. Josh Myers, second round pick, 4 years as a starter. This should have been his big opportunity to get some 3-year, $30 million deal on the open market, the John Runyon Jr. deal, right? He got 1 year, $3 million as a backup. Like, this is a huge opportunity. And then Aaron Banks is the opposite, right? Aaron Banks could have been not that different than Mekhi Becton, who got 2 years, 20, or even, somebody like Tevin Jenkins, who got 1 year, $3 million. Had he suffered an injury last year, or had something like that happened, he probably gets something closer to one of those two deals. But he finishes it strong, was healthy in San Francisco for the most part, and ends up getting a 4 year, $67 million deal. So like, the variance there is just freaking insane, depending on what injuries you've had, how healthy you are coming into your free agent offseason. Chris Godwin, his second and third contract paydays, he's coming off a major injury on both of them. Now, he's a good enough player that he got paid in both of those, but would have been paid even more on both had he not been coming off a catastrophic injury on both his second and third contracts. So, man, those things matter a ton. And that second contract especially is the one where you've really got to make it count. And for some players, it happens, Aaron Banks, and for others, I'm sure it's very disappointing for guys like Josh Myers and AJ Dillon. I say yes to considerably less than 130 million. Fair enough, Dennis. I appreciate you. I see the Packers extending Tom and then moving him to left tackle where he played in college, and putting Belton at right tackle and Morgan at right guard. I think our best long-term offensive line. Not to, poo-poo your opinion, Bruce City. Maybe it happens. There is no difference anymore between left tackle and right tackle. In fact, arguably better pass rushers play at left defensive end than they do at right defensive end. And so flipping Zack Tom to the left side for what reason, at what cost, to what end, that does not benefit you at all. In fact, now you're having him go against probably less defensive ends, and your new right tackle has to go against some of the tougher ones. And, it's not just this easy thing where you go into player management on Madden and change him over from right tackle to left tackle, and he's the same rating. He's got to learn an entirely different position. He's been playing high level right tackle now in the NFL. To switch sides and to get that totally different cadence and your footwork entirely down differently, you're playing with fire. Like, he's probably, even if it's just a little bit, he's probably going to be worse because he's practiced and well versed at playing right tackle at this point. You're messing with fire. I don't think there's any upside to doing it, and there is the potential for downside or even significant downside if it doesn't work the way that you want it to. So to me, and especially when Jordan Morgan is a left tackle or a right guard, like, he has the versatility to play anywhere. And Anthony Belton probably, I think, is a right guard. I think you're probably looking at a long-term line of Jordan, assuming things work out, Jordan Morgan at left tackle, Aaron Banks at left guard. Center's a little bit more in flux because Elton Jenkins has that contract decision next year and is getting a little bit older. But then Anthony Belton at right guard and Zack Tom at right tackle. What's the worst situation as a new head coach? Saints or Giants? Saints are in cap hell, but the Giants owner is super impatient. It's going to depend on my amount of influence and how much say that I get. If I can take the head coaching job in New Orleans and say, we're doing this my way, I will probably take it, because you're right. The Saints management and ownership is insanely patient. And I feel like I would want to be able to say, we're going to rip the Band-Aid on this thing right now. Enough is enough. Enough of these half measures, enough borrowing from the future to put together crappy teams. We're going to be bad for a couple of years, guys. We're going to be bad. We're going to develop our young players. We're going to see what Tyler Shuck has and Spencer Rattler has. We're going to get younger all across the team. We're going to get cheap and young, and we're going to see who sticks. It's going to be 2 to 3 years of foundation setting. And then after we get that foundation, we'll have a bunch of money, probably some early draft picks along the way, because we're probably going to have a couple of years of being bad. But the foundation will be set. We're going to get a system in place. We're going to bring these young players up, not only a foundation, but raise our floor up. And then we're going to have a bunch of money to spend in free agency. And we're going to have the ability to spend, again, some premium draft picks, because we probably didn't do very good through that course of time. If I can have say in doing it that way and say, hey, guys, we need to take our medicine here, I will take probably the Saints job. If that's not an option, I still might take the Saints job, but I would probably lean a little bit more closer to New York, because I do think there's a couple pieces like a Malik Neighbors and some things like that in a defensive line that is potentially really special, that I can maybe find ways to win while we continue to try to find our franchise quarterback, or maybe just somehow Jackson Dart ends up being that. I'm not expecting it, but all things equal, I probably take the Giants. But if I could have a little bit more influence and say, hey, we're going to be bad for a couple of years, I'm probably taking the Saints job. Let's see. I'd leave the field if Cooper rushed me. Yes, very much so. Yeah, he's not somebody that you want bearing down on you. I'm wondering how wide receiver Jaden Yankee and cornerback Gregory Jr. will fare up with the Packers. They're somewhat new additions to the team. Daryl, if you have not checked out today's episode, I highly recommend it. I went over 13 players that we have not spent much time discussing, or that most people probably have not spent any time thinking about. Jaden Yankee and Gregory Jr. are both on the list of players that I talked about in great detail today. It's about a 45-minute episode breaking down 13 players. Those 13 players that we went over today include Johnny Lumpkin, Cornelius Johnson, Keith Randolph, Isaiah Dunn, Jaden Yankee, Trey Hill, Jeremiah Martin, James Esther, Gregory Jr., Deslin Alexander, Julian Hicks, Nesta Jade Silvera, and Messiah Swinson. So definitely go check that out. And I definitely talk about those two in pretty great detail today. You always pair Malik Heath and Bo Melton together, but who do you like more? I think those two and McCole Hardman are going to be in for quite the battle for a number 3 or the number 6 wide receiver spot. 3 guys fighting for 1. I'm probably, again, I like all those guys. If I'm Goody, and I've talked about this in the past, if everyone's healthy, I'm probably just keeping Golden, Savion Williams, Wicks, Reed, Dobbs, understanding that Watson's going to come back at some point, and those are probably going to be my 6. And also knowing that what I really need is one of those 3 to get back on the practice squad. Melton, Heath, or McCole Hardman. I don't need all 3. I would love to. And if I could get all three back on the practice squad, I'm not going to say no to it, but I just need one or two of those guys back on the practice squad. And I think there is a 99.99999% chance that I can get at least one, if not two of those guys back in the practice squad. So I like all of them. I think all of them are 53-man rosterable players. I think the odds of losing all three of them are insanely slim. So, and I don't really care which one it is because they all bring something different to the table. I think Mecole Hardman is going to give you a little bit more gadget wide receiver, some speed down the field, and most importantly, the best punt returner on the team. If he just wins the punt returner job, it might be him. You might keep him on the 53 for that reason. And then he can give you some other stuff as well. And there's a chance in that scenario that Savion Williams is inactive on game days because you go with Golden, Reed, Wicks, Dobbs, and then Hardman as your number 5, because you're not going to probably, get Savion Williams in the field in that situation, unless Savion Williams is just like unbelievable from day one. But if he needs some time to develop, Hardman's active. Savion Williams is not active. Hardman serves as your punt returner and sort of your gadgety number 5 wide receiver. If none of them make it, obviously you keep all the 5 guys up that are the top 5. If Melton makes it, I think of Hardman, Melton, and Heath. I think Melton's the best receiver of the group, but I think he's sort of Jaden Reed insurance. I think he's a slot guy primarily, can play a little bit on the outside, can give you some of those gadgety type plays, but can also run a lot of the same routes that Jaden Reed does, just not quite as well. But I think he's actually, again, the best wide receiver of the 3, but doesn't give you much on teams. He could do some kick returning stuff, but he's probably going to be like 4th or 5th on the kick returner depth chart, and he's not a punt returner. And he's not going to play outside a ton. He's not a great blocker on the outside. So there's just limited stuff that he gives to you, but I think he's a good wide receiver, and he's got great speed. And then Malik Heath, he's going to be your best blocking receiver on the outside, can actually play outside primarily, which is what you need a little bit more of, because Wicks can play in the slot, Reed can play in the slot, Golden can play in the slot, Savion can play in the slot, Mecole Hardman can play in the slot, Tucker Kraft, like we can go on and on. Luke Musgrave, they've got enough slot receivers to rule the world. They need kind of guys who can play on the outside. And there you've got Wicks, Dobbs, Golden can play on the outside, Savion can play on the outside, but it starts to get a little bit more thin after that. And Malik Heath gives you that true kind of possession receiver. So again, they're all different flavors. They're all different types. A lot of it probably depends on what the health of the receiver room looks like. And if everyone's healthy, again, I could see a world in which all 3 get released and you just take whatever 1 or 2 guys back that you can get on the practice squad and kind of go from there. Who do I think the heart of this team is since Aaron Jones left? I actually think it might be Josh Jacobs. I think they may have replaced one heart for another in that running back room. Josh Jacobs is probably in that conversation. I think Tucker Kraft is going to become a little bit more of that as well. I actually think Jordan's going to become a little bit more of that. I think you're going to see some of these younger players start to take a little bit more of a leadership role in this team, including Jordan and Tucker Kraft being in that group. I think Xavier McKinney on the defensive side of the ball. Those would be probably the ones that kind of come to mind, but I think it might just be Josh Jacobs, to be honest. Malik Heath, since he can run block a little bit, again, run blocker, possession wide receiver. I think he showed some signs at the end of last year. Again, you could make the argument of Heath over Hardman and Melton if you wanted to go in that direction and keep a number 6 wide receiver. Goldex, thank you for the question. How would I feel about Kalen King actually being on the field this year? That's definitely a possibility now. And would you rather have him or Kamal Haddon on the field playing corner? Again, not to punt on this one, Goldex, but got a huge episode coming on exactly about this topic on Sunday. So stick around for that. We'll go over both of the corners in detail. They're 2 totally different corners. 2 totally different corners. So this is a choose your own adventure, choose your preference, and figure out which one that you like. And then obviously just which one's better, but 2 very different corners between the 2. Again, we'll talk about that on Sunday quite a bit. Okay. What is the backstory in the Pack-A-Day podcast? I'm going to try to keep this short because most of you have probably heard this story in some form before. The real quick short story of me, I've been a huge Packer fan my entire life, was at the Kittrick-Taylor game. Brett Favre to Kittrick-Taylor. Favre comes in from Mikowski, basically baptized as a Green Bay Packer fan. Grew up 12 minutes from Lambeau Field. My parents are season ticket holders. Just, again, baptized in it from day one. Huge Packer fan, huge football fan. The very first moment I saw my first football game, I was immediately hooked on the product, have been ever since, and the rest was history. So as I got through college and basically spent all of high school and college playing Madden and watching football and basically getting a PhD in football on the back end without actually doing any of my schoolwork, which has mostly worked out. But then I kind of thought I screwed myself because I didn't think I was going to get any sort of journalism or broadcasting job because that's not what I went for. I didn't really spend a ton of time. I got a history degree in college. So decided I was just going to start my own blog, just start blogging about the Packers on my own. SconnieSports.com. I put as much effort into probably that as pretty much anything I do now. I spent a lot of time talking Badgers, Bucks, Brewers, and Packers, and probably 2 or 3 people read it. And so sometime down the road, it's probably a little bit more than that, but not by much. Like a good day would get like 20 to 40 reads, maybe a very good day. And I decided it just wasn't, I was putting all this time into it and nobody was really reading it. So I'm like, what am I doing here? A little bit later, I started gaining, I signed up on Twitter, get a little bit of a Twitter following. And there was a website called Titletown Sound Off that was hiring and looking for a Packers blogger. And they had a smallish following. Some people knew who it was. They were getting a little bit of traction. And I had written all the stuff for Scotty Sports. So I sent them all the stuff that I wrote and they were happy to take me on. It was a non-paid position. And I said I would do like an article or 2 per month. And I did some film breakdowns and a couple of them caught on pretty well. And I started to gain a little bit more following on Twitter. I'm talking like 1,000 followers, something like that. And, eventually there was a game where the Packers played the Chiefs and Aaron Rodgers had like 5 touchdowns, no picks. And PFF gave him a negative grade on the day. And people freaked out. And I was doing some of my grading the pack stuff for Scotty Sports back in the day. So I talked to Cheesehead TV and Jersey Al, and I said, hey, I've graded games in the past. This is a huge topic of conversation. Would you mind if I came on and did a guest piece for Cheesehead TV breaking down that game and whether or not it was actually a negative graded game or not, or whether it was neutral or whether it was positive and if PFF's just out of their mind? They're like, yeah, absolutely. We would love to have you for a guest article. Wrote the guest article. It did really well because it was a huge topic of conversation. I eventually said that it was a slightly above average or like neutral game. Wasn't great. He threw a couple passes that should have been picks. Most of his touchdown passes were like run after the catch stuff. So you could actually kind of see PFF eventually changed their grade to a slightly positive grade, same as what I'd had my grade on it. And anyway, long story short, had that one for Cheesehead TV. Didn't think anything of it at the time. Continued to write for Titletown Sound Off for a little bit. Ended up stopping that. And then about 8 years ago this summer, I talked to Cheesehead TV. They were hiring for a writer. I had done that guest piece. And I said, hey, I want to come on. I want to do this for real. I want to write an article weekly. And I want to do this. And I'm going to go aggressive on it. I want to really make something here. Jersey L, we talked for a while, went back and forth, eventually said yes. That's when I started doing my Grading the Pack article and doing a lot more film breakdowns over on Cheesehead TV. Started doing some podcasts, got to talk to, that's when like Aaron came back to Cheesehead TV. Him and I started to do a couple things, or he had me on a couple different times. And all of a sudden I was doing radio hits for Marcus Eversole. And all of a sudden I got the opportunity to do Green Bay Nation with Lily Zhao. And I started to get to the point of like, I was getting a following and I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I need a podcast. I didn't really want to do a podcast, to be honest. I'm like, it just sounds like a lot of work, but I had 2 ideas in the back of my mind. I had the New York Times, The Daily, which did 5 times a week. They did a daily episode, Monday through Friday, about a specific news topic. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, that would be a great way to do a Packers podcast. Like just do 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, for about 30 minutes, the 20 minutes a day, and just talk about one Packers topic. And I said, I probably can't do it because I was working a full-time job. I probably can't do it every day, but I'll get 4 people to do this with me. I'll do Monday, like Dusty Evely will do Tuesday, Zach Jacobson will do Wednesday. I was thinking like Matub could do Thursday, and we'll kind of do, then somebody else will figure out for Friday. And we'll do this list of people, and we'll have 5 people that are in charge of the show. We have a new episode every single day with a different host every single day, and it's their show. I was thinking on it. All of a sudden, I saw a commercial that talked about stopping smoking and somebody smoking 20 packs a day. I had packs a day. Oh my God, pack a day. I want to do a daily Packers podcast. Now I have the name Pack a Day. Within about 30 seconds of hearing that Pack a Day, I posted on Twitter, who wants to do a podcast about the Packers? I got over 200 official applications. To this day, the hardest part of the entire podcast, the Pack a Day podcast, was narrowing down those 200 plus people to about 22 people. We had so many great people that we decided to do 7 days a week. We put people in groups of 3s and had everyone in charge of their own day. I thought it was going to be a train wreck because I thought everyone was just going to bail on it, not really do it. and not take it seriously. Everyone did. Like to this day, there's probably like 10 to 15 episodes that I've had to fill in for on the audio side of things. That was the start of the audio podcast. That was like in early summer, I want to say, somewhere around there, or maybe spring. And I think it was early summer, late spring, early summer. And by that training camp that year, we were doing the podcast every single day. We've never missed a day on the audio side. I did miss one day. I didn't start the YouTube channel until maybe 3 years after that, 3 years after that. And then I've missed one day on the YouTube side, but I've never missed a day on the audio side. And the rest was history. And it just then became where I got credentialed by Packer Report, and other things have come up. And obviously now did the Bleach Report stuff, the daily radio show, and now Pack-A-Day is my full-time job. So long story short, there's probably more stops along the way, but without boring anyone any longer, that's basically the story of the Pack-A-Day podcast. And just really quick, cannot thank everyone who's been involved with it from day one. Some people no longer with the show. A lot of people still are. Some people we've gained along the way. Anyone that's been a guest, a host, a co-host, anything involved with it. Tyler on the social media and thumbnail side of things. Just everyone has been the most just unbelievable people that you could possibly imagine. And I owe so much of everything to those people who've put a ton of blood, sweat, and tears into this project. And they are amazing, amazing people. Obviously never going to happen, but in some bizarre world where Taylor Elgersma breaks out and becomes a superstar, what could Jordan Love's trade value be? It just depends. Like if he goes out and has a monster year this year, you can get everything. You can get a massive haul for him in return. 3 first-round picks, young player. He's a franchise quarterback with the ability to be a top 10 QB in the league. You will get everything. You'll get a ton of stuff for him. If he has a good year, but maybe not a great year, we're probably talking about, maybe a first-round pick and maybe a little bit of other stuff, but certainly still value for him. If he has a really bad year, then it's a little bit more complicated. But a lot of it would be dependent upon how he played this year. And then, assuming like you just knew Elgersma was like undeniable and that's what you wanted to do moving forward, then yeah, hopefully he plays great. Jordan plays great this year. You get your insane haul of picks. You take your dead cap hit for Jordan, but you're paying Elgersma nothing. So you're not really worried about it. And now you've got your franchise QB in Elgersma, who's not only younger, but is cheaper for the time being. And now you've got a massive haul of stuff from Jordan Love. And that's the direction that you would probably go in. Good luck with that. I don't see that happening. But if it did happen, like your hypothetical here, that's probably the direction that you would go in. Yeah, it's pretty stupid how someone thinks anyone will be traded away. Did not know somebody's head was so far. I don't know what we're talking about here, Daryl, but yeah, maybe I missed something. My apologies if I missed something there. Should we be concerned about the linebacker room for aggression now that Anthony Campanelli is gone? Just noted, right? Like, just keep an eye on it. I think Duggan's going to do a great job in that linebacker room. But anytime you lose somebody that talented, it's definitely noteworthy. So just again to kind of keep an eye on it. But I think Duggan's going to do a great job. But hopefully, no real regression from Campanelli leaving. But it wouldn't be shocking if there was, because he's a great coach. They're not going to trade away anyone. Goody is not making those deals. So much paperwork to go over. Amazing. Dylan became a dud in his last 2 years with Green Bay. Was not the same. Definitely had a hard time. Never lived quite up to the expectation. I was never a Dylan guy myself, meaning on the field. Obviously off the field, mayor of Door County, and everyone seemed to love him. But yeah, I think there was a limit. I think the first 2 years are actually now a little bit underrated for what he did. But yeah, those last 2 years just kind of did not live up to expectations. Happy Friday, everyone. Andy, if the NFL created some crazy rule, for example, if you score a 70-plus yard touchdown, it's worth 20 points, how fast would the league reshape itself to take advantage of it? I think actually it's the opposite. I think defenses would be far more tuned into making sure that it never happened, period. Like, even if they had to go, if anytime you were like 30 yards or further out, like, honestly, you could see teams start jumping off sides to get them past that mark so they don't have to worry about it anymore. Kicking it out of bounds so that they start with the ball at the 35-yard line, just never even giving the opposing team really that opportunity to get it. And then even if they were back that far, just playing like some 3 safety looks or whatever you need to do just to make sure that you never gave up that play. So I actually think it would be less to do on an offensive side of things. And I think defenses and special teams would be acutely aware of just never giving the opposing offense or special teams the ability to score. I think you would honestly see the majority of those take place on pick sixes. I think you would see, if there was you were driving down the field and, through a pass, you were inside the 30-yard line, threw a pick and the other team returned it for a touchdown. I think that would actually be your most likely opportunity to score a 20-pointer in that scenario. I think the concept of teams adapting to league trends, tush push, 3-and-D role players in the NBA, etc., is so interesting and cool to watch how different teams adapt, counter, and then recycle trends. It's a beautiful thing in football. It's what I think makes football just one of the many things that makes football the best, because number one, there's been nobody that's been able to truly hack the game yet. Meaning in the NBA, it's all 3-pointers, right? 3-pointers and dunks, 3-pointers and dunks, 3-pointers and dunks. In Major League Baseball, we're looking at launch angle and home runs and strikeouts, home runs and strikeouts, home runs and strikeouts. You're sort of trying to mass produce and, look at the mathematical odds of doing any one thing. With football, there hasn't really been that yet. There hasn't been a hack. And I think the beautiful thing is we're starting to maybe see it a little bit on defense, where you're just keeping two safeties high to not allow big plays, understanding that big plays are sort of what amounts to a lot of points. But outside of that, there's no one thing, because if you sell out to stop the run, you can be beat in the passing game. If you sell out to stop the pass, you can be beat in the running game. And that's why these things ebb and flow. And one thing becomes popular and then the other becomes popular, and it goes back and forth, right? So I think that's an important thing to keep an eye on. And I just think that there's no perfect way to defend everything. There's always options for you to attack the opposing team, both on offense and defense and on special teams. So far, maybe we get something eventually that can really hack the game in a major way. But so far, it's been pretty unhackable. And I think that's a really solid thing as the NFL continues to grow moving forward. Andy, you're the best Packers content creator. Well, thank you so much for that. Which player are you most excited to watch this year, Lloyd or Golden? I'll probably go Golden on that end, but I'm very excited to see what Marshawn Lloyd can do as well. And Evan, very, very appreciative of the kind words. Thank you so much for that. Do you think we can keep Marshawn Lloyd and potentially make him the starter of the future when Josh Jacobs starts to regress? Let's just see what Lloyd's got this year. All right, let's see that first, and then kind of see where we go from there. I think he's a really talented player. I don't know that he's ever going to be able to carry the full load, but I do think he can be an explosive player in Green Bay. Let's see how he does in pass pro. Let's see how he does with the fumbles. Let's see how he does catching the ball out of the backfield and just kind of staying healthy too. He's got some questions he has to answer. I think he's really, really talented. Again, I don't think he's ever going to be a 20 carry a game guy. I think you're probably looking at more of a Aaron Jones workload, even if he does become the 1A guy in Green Bay. But let's just see what he does this year first and then kind of attack it from there. But I think he's super talented. I really do. I'm really excited to watch him play this year. This is a really interesting question, Evan. So big Radiohead fan, especially really starting with OK Computer and then probably going through, I don't know. I loved Amnesiac too. And then, Hail to the Thief. I love, so probably for the most part, In Rainbows had moments as well. Probably like Kid A through In Rainbows is probably my peak Radiohead fandom. Or sorry, OK Computer to In Rainbows. OK Computer has like my favorite song of all time. Paranoid Android is in easily my top 3 songs of all time, and probably just my number 1. It's probably my favorite song of all time. I think Kid A is a better total album, but I could go either way, and I would never want to give up either of those albums because I think they're both just masterpieces. So I could go in either direction. I think Kid A is a slightly better album, but I think OK Computer has maybe the best song of either of the albums. So really, really good question though. Can we get an update on Julian Fleming, the former number 1 player in the country in the CJ Stroud and Bryce Young class? I know he failed his physical, but are we going to keep him or cut him? Julian Fleming, J Money. Am I missing something here? Who the hell is Julian Fleming? Is that the other corner? No, that's Tyron Herring. Who the hell is Julian Fleming? Julian Fleming is an American football wide receiver. He previously played college football for the Ohio State Buckeyes and then Penn State. 6'2", 240. Did they sign him today? He does not have an NFL team. I have no idea who that is. I definitely don't think he's a Packer. So, J Money, you're gonna have to clarify. Maybe I'm missing something there. Lloyd, this makes me wonder why Goody signed Amar Johnson out of South Dakota, so it's not guaranteed that Lloyd will be kept. No, Amar has nothing to do with Marshawn Lloyd. Marshawn Lloyd will be kept no matter what. Jacobs and Lloyd are making this team. And then you're probably having, I think you're going to have 4 running back spots. I think Emmanuel Wilson and Chris Brooks both make it. If you do have only one of them make it, or if there's only 3, then I think it's going to be quite the battle between Brooks and Emmanuel Wilson. But Amar Johnson's good, but he's just going to have to figure out probably first a practice squad spot and go from there, unless he just completely breaks out in a major way. And then in that case, it's Chris Brooks and Emmanuel Wilson who are in danger, not Marshawn Lloyd. Andy, hope it's a great Memorial Day weekend for you with the tradition of a UDFA making it to the 53. Who is your top 3 to make it this year? Yeah, Nasir Stackhouse is probably number 1. I think he's got kind of the easiest road there. Jonathan Baldwin probably in that conversation as well. And then Jamon Johnson is probably the other one. Those are the 3 biggest guarantees. But don't sleep on Tyler Cooper either, the guard from Minnesota. I think he's going to have a chance. If it's one of them, it's one of those 4, but I'll say Stackhouse probably has the best chance. What if running back Amar Johnson is chosen over Marshawn Lloyd? I wouldn't mind seeing it happen again. Never going to happen. Amar Johnson can make the team. It will not be at the expense of Marshawn Lloyd, unless Lloyd is injured. Sorry, did I miss a super chat or 2 here? My apologies if I did. Let me get to these really quick. All right, so Nick, sorry that I missed this from earlier. I don't understand all the LaFleur hate, all things considered, age, calling plays, win percentage, etc. How many other coaches would you trade straight up? In Green Bay, probably none. I think what he's developed here and what he has right now, I don't think you would trade him for anything. I think you can, kind of keep it status quo. If I was hiring a new coach for a team today, LaFleur's probably in my top 5 to 8, and maybe even in the top 3 or 4, just flat out. But for I'm not going to fire LaFleur to get to anyone else at this moment. I'll put it that way. I think he deserves to continue what he's built in Green Bay. I really like what Matt LaFleur has done. I have no Matt LaFleur hate. Are there things he can do better? Absolutely. But still have a ton of faith in Matt LaFleur as a head coach. All right. Speaking of NBA, thoughts on SGA for Giannis? I mean, both teams say no, probably would be my guess. If you're the Thunder, you're going to win the championship this year. SGA is your MVP. I know he wasn't drafted by them, but he's basically homegrown, all things considered. Like, he was not SGA when they traded for him. He was a prospect, basically. He was a good prospect, but he's a prospect, and they've basically grown him up into the MVP he is today. And you're not going to get older for no reason. For the Bucks probably say yes. I take that back. But what I would say for Milwaukee is, where do you go next? There's no pathway with SGA. SGA is just going to demand a trade next year. There's nothing to have any sort of connectivity with SGA. You cannot put a winning team around SGA in Milwaukee based as is. So he's just going to want out. So Giannis at least might stay loyal to Milwaukee if you want to keep him. So to me, in a vacuum, yeah, you'd probably take the younger SGA right now, but Milwaukee's just in total no man's land. Then you're not getting any picks. They're completely cap hell. They have no way to improve the team. And now you're going from Giannis to SGA. The team right now just gets worse. SGA, you can make an argument is MVP and Giannis was 3rd or whatever. This team with Giannis is better than this team with SGA. So the Bucks have no future with it and no present, and they get worse currently. And the Thunder just unequivocally say no. So it's a no all the way around. All right. Just double checking here where I left off. It's always cool to hear your voice in the press conferences. I hopefully have gotten better at questions. It was something that I struggled with originally, but hopefully I've gotten a little bit better at that. Consistency is second to none. Thanks so much, J Money. Norm, you are more than welcome. Thanks for being here. Why wouldn't Goot try and sign either Mike Hilton or former Packer Rasul Douglas to help add depth to the corner room if Jair doesn't return? Both vets who could help cheap on short-term deals. No, I'll actually say no. Rasul looked awful last year. I mean, flat out awful. Did not look the same. Lost a step. Didn't look like his technique was as good. And he was battling for on a Super Bowl team. Would not sign Rasul if I were Green Bay. If you got to a desperate stage, maybe you take a chance and just hope that the fire is relit or whatever, but not what I'm doing. And then Mike Hilton's a slot only, and you've just brought in Nate Hobbs to basically be that. Plus you've got Javon Bullard there. Mike Hilton's not going to help you really anywhere else. So no, I have really no interest in either player, and they're both older. Neither of them are as good as they once were. And here's the other thing. Green Bay doesn't, depending on what happens with Jair, they don't really need like a start. Even if Jair is gone, you're going to get Valentine. There's nobody that you're going to sign right now that's going to be as good as Valentine on the outside. There just isn't anyone available. So even Valentine and Nixon are going to be on the outside, and Hobbs are in the slot. There's no available free agent that would start over Valentine, start over Nixon, or start over Hobbs. You have your three starters. What you really need in that situation is a depth piece who can step up and play if you need them to, but also give you some special teams ability. And that's a tough thing to find right now. Again, there's just nobody out there. So I think the big thing is there's no free agents that are really worth signing. Those two players are older and are not going to give you any special teams value. Plus, they're not going to beat out anyone that's already on the roster. Plus, you got to kind of figure out the Jair situation first, because if Jair's back, you probably feel really good because you've got Jair, Valentine, Hobbs, Nixon, plus Javon Bullard. And then, you've got Kamal Haddon, Kalen King, Micah Robinson fighting it out for those last couple spots, or maybe even just one spot. It's going to be a zone-based defense. You're going to play a lot of safeties. I think they're fine in that situation. So you got to figure out Jair first. And then if not, I still think you probably give OTAs, mini camps, and training camp to guys like Kamal Haddon, Micah Robinson, and Kalen King to see if they can step up and be better. And it wouldn't stun me if, especially like Haddon or King or Micah Robinson, are just better right now than what Rasul Douglas is going to give you. Like I would rather right now probably go with that than what I saw from Rasul on tape last year. So no, I would not sign either of those guys, and I'd kind of continue as is. But then if you get to the end of camp and Jair is gone, and you're feeling comfortable maybe with Nixon and Valentine and Bullard and Hobbs, but the rest of your corners, nobody stepped up. You don't feel good about King or Haddon or Robinson or any of the guys. Then I'm probably looking to see if I can somehow make an upgrade, probably via trade, but maybe via free agency if I can find somebody as well. Don't be condescending. I know it's not just like switching positions in Madden. I actually played football, not just Madden, but anyway, Tom played on the left side in college. Yeah, I wasn't being condescending, I don't think at all. Bruce City Sports. I was just saying in general, I know a lot of people just say like, hey, just switch positions. But no, he's been a valuable right tackle, and I would not have any interest in moving him at the moment unless there was an absolute need to do so. And I just don't see any reason why that would be the case right now. So nope, sorry if it came across condescending, but it was certainly not my intention in any way, shape, or form. Don't know who's available, but adding a vet to the defensive line would help. Both that cornerback and defensive line room have no depth behind the top three vets off Kenny's awful season last year. Brooks, who didn't step forward too. Definitely need some depth there. Just don't think there's anything really available in free agency at the moment. Oh, apparently he did not pass his physical. Fleming was reported to sign, but didn't pass his physical. There we go. All right. That's why he's not on the team. Source, somebody reported we signed him in undrafted free agency. I guess somebody falsely reported, like when we were framed, that we wanted the tush push to be banned. Yeah, I guess from what it was that he was supposed to be, but never actually signed. Agree the value between left tackle and right tackle is overrated, but it wasn't a thing. There wouldn't be the pay gap between the two positions. The extra value is that there's really not as much anymore. Wirfs was paid, but he was paid as a right tackle initially. He moved to left tackle. Penei Sewell is a right tackle, and he's basically the highest paid tackle. Then you have Trent Williams and Christian Darrisaw left tackles, but then you have Lane Johnson at right tackle. So in your top five, you have 3 left tackles and 2 right tackles, but one of those left tackles played right tackle. So there's not really the discrepancy that there once was anymore. After that, you get a little bit of a gap in a few more left tackles, but even Jawan Taylor at right tackle for KC is making $20 million. And Ryan Ramczyk was making $19 million. So it's nowhere near the discrepancy that it once was. Andy did a 45-minute it's about forgotten Packers and forgot one. I did not forget one, apparently. He's not on the team. I was just confused. I didn't know if with all the notifications being down today, I thought maybe I missed a signing today. The extra value is that the left side, again, it's not a thing really anymore. The blind side stuff, it's semi-important, but again, do you care if your quarterback gets blasted from the left side or the right side, regardless of handedness? Quarterbacks are scanning the field. They're in shotgun now. There's not enough, or is not as much under center. So you're in shotgun, you're seeing both left and right sides now. So it's not what it once was, where that used to be a huge value. And again, you're seeing a lot of the best pass rushers playing left defensive end. So you can make an argument right tackle is right there is just as valuable as left tackle. Thanks, Andy, for the feedback. Always appreciated, because and they older, they might add depth even after losing a step. Yep. But again, there's a reason that they're free agents at this stage of the game for sure. Love to see Jacoby Myers in Green Bay. Do the Packers often sign trade players from the Raiders, or is that just in my head? A lot of Raiders, a lot of former Raiders on the team. Don't think they're going to go wide receiver hunting anywhere in the near future after drafting 2 in the first 3 rounds. Which Packers players would be superstars if they were a few inches taller? I mean, Jair, if you could add a couple inches to him and just a little bit more, muscularity to that frame, some functional strength, that would be a really fun one. I mean, if Jaden Reed, if you could make a few inches taller, that would probably be a good one. But there's not a ton. Zack Tom, if you could make a little bit bigger, would be a really fun one as well. If he could keep everything the way that he was, but just a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger, he's probably in that, Tristan Wirfs and Penei Sewell category. But there's not many. I don't think most of these players are. Green Bay goes after pretty height, weight, speed guys, so there's probably not a ton of those on the roster right now. Time to pay Zack Tom just keeps getting more expensive. Yes, he does. Jair comes back and has a Pro Bowl type season. Should we keep him or try to trade him and get a good haul? I don't know what's going to happen with Jair, man. I wish I knew, but just kind of taking it one step at a time, seeing if he's back. And then if he plays great this year, we'll see if they bring him back on any sort of restructured deal, or if he's on, they kind of void the rest of his contract, or if they have that option next year. Those are all going to be very interesting things to see. But first things first, let's just see if Jair's back in Green Bay, and then we can kind of go from there. If the Packers really need depth at corner, I will step up and be their number 2. I'm not delusional. I know I would be the number 1. Love that for you, Drew. Jair's 3 years removed from being elite would be nice, but just health playing average would help solidify that corner room. That offense for Green Bay has 0 excuses this season. Running back room depth, wide receiver room depth, O-line depth, healthy love with Willis on the bench. Just need Musgrave to play like a second rounder and Lloyd to live up to the hype. And heck, even if those guys don't, you should have some pretty good options to be a pretty dynamic offense. But I'm with you. They should have all the answers that they need on offense. All right, friends, I do need to get out of here. I will see you guys all very soon. Members only Q&A next week and another happy hour next Friday. Of course, Pack-A-Day episodes every single day. Thank you for the kind words. Thank you for the super chats. I'll see you all very soon. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.